Join the voice of the Vikings, Paul Allen, out at Hy-Vee in Lakeville this afternoon. That's right, today. Stop by from 4 to 5 p.m. and meet PA and Vikings defensive tackle Harrison Phillips, thanks to Hy-Vee and Pepsi. Plus a live Q&A event to follow. Get the full details now at KFAN.com. Keyword, calendar.
What are you doing here on a Tuesday? Tuesday are players' days off, and then like Phillips and Flores and Daniels, and I mean those Thursday. You know, what are you doing here on a Tuesday?
Well, Phillips, Flores, and Daniels got moved to Tuesdays now, so we have coordinators in about an hour and a half
with no consideration of the scribe schedule.
Well, yeah, it works better, I think, for them, because what they have kind of said is, hey, late in the week, we're kind of locked in, and some of it is we're going to give you better answers on a Tuesday because we just have more brain space to think back on, especially with people asking about the previous game, which obviously with Brian Flores, there's going to be a lot of that.
Good point.
This week, so it's like, hey, this actually works better for getting more insight from the people we're talking to. So I think usually in those cases we say, yep. Tell us when that's going to be, and we'll be there.
This is Ben Goessling, who joins 9 to noon and Bumper to Bumper with Barrero weekly. At Ben Goessling is where you can follow him via Twitter. Do so, as 9 to noon does, if you are so inclined. There you can learn about the Access Vikings podcast, and also is it Access Vikings for the newsletter?
Yes, it's Access Vikings for anything and everything. We are keeping the brand going with that at the Star Tribune.
Yeah, we got a newsletter these days.
Yep.
It's Howard Sinker's favorite. He sent me something when I was calling races at Canterbury, because Howard loves horse racing at Canterbury.
Yeah.
He loves newsletters. Heard us talking about it. He's like, here's the link to the news, so I could check out the newsletter.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Howard. But speaking of Ben's Twitter, at Ben Goessling, I am going to be at Hy-Vee Robbinsdale today from 4 until 5 with Vikings defensive tackle Harrison Phillips. Hy-Vee Robbinsdale, go crazy. 4 to 5 today, pictures and autographs with number 97. Ben tweeted about 97 yesterday after watching back the Vikings' victory over the New York Giants. What did you share for those who may have missed that tweet? And good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, it was just, I think watching it back, there was a level of disruptiveness from him that, I mean, he's had moments of that, but he flashed, for me, pretty much right away. I mean, the first play of the game, he had, I think, to fight through two blockers and jump over a gap to make the stop. And just pass rush-wise, I mean, he's had a little bit of that to him over the years, but it was noticeable early. I think some of the hand fighting, some of the quickness off the line was better than what we've seen. Had a sack, and then the clip that I tweeted was a pressure later in the game that just led Daniel Jones to throw the ball away. Josh Metellus gets a hand on it and knocks it down, kind of on a diving pass breakup. But yeah, Harrison Phillips just was in the backfield a lot, and I thought had a pretty strong day. I mean, really, that's a spot where you kind of say, well, what's the depth look like there? What's the depth like with that defensive line? But if he's playing that way, and especially playing that way at the nose, I think that changes a lot of things. I thought he was awfully impressive.
Speaking of the interior of Brian Flores' defense, was there any surprise? Now we're only talking 10 or 12 plays as the snap counts go, that Taki Taimani was active and Levi Drake Rodriguez was not.
I was a little surprised by that. I thought Rodriguez was probably going to have a role based on what we've seen from him in the preseason. But yeah, I think they liked the matchup better with Taimani this week. I wonder if that'll be a thing that we see bounce around over the course of the next few games based on which matchups they feel better about for which player. But yeah, that was a little bit of a surprise to me.
The 49ers looked quite good last night. What do you think about Sunday? Just quick twitch on a Tuesday with the right to change the opinion Friday when you're on Bumper to Bumper.
Yeah, I think it's a tough matchup. Certainly, the Vikings were able to win that game on Monday night last year, but I think it changes a little bit when it's a different set of characters. The Christian McCaffrey injury situation is going to be interesting to watch this week. Sounds like that was worse than what the 49ers let on / disclosed on the injury report.
Yeah.
He did not play, obviously, and I think Jordan Mason said after the game, I knew Friday that I was going to start. So
why do you think it's worse than what they disclosed? I mean, because the questionable, it's... why do you think it's worse?
Well, if they had said
maybe it could have been
Friday,
doubtful.
Yeah. I mean, if they so Friday in their world was Thursday, really, because it's a Monday night game. So you still had a day of practice. I mean, normally you get injury reports Friday, but for a Monday night game, the last injury report comes out Saturday. So if they already knew Thursday that he was not going to start, listing him as questionable, and there is no more probable, obviously. So questionable can mean a lot of things, but listing him as questionable, I think, was the thing that's like, most of the time you just assume, okay, he's going to play, and all of the chatter, people trying to figure out, what's this going to mean for, everybody wants to know with him because of fantasy lineups. All of the chatter was, he's good to go. He's going to play. He's listed as questionable, but he's good to go. And then for it to go the way it did, it was like, okay, this is a little bit of a different version of events than what they were saying. And then that gets into the question of, if you have Florio on this week, I'm sure he'll be fired up about this. But
good point.
The injury report stuff is supposed to be transparent because people are putting money on these games, and that's one of those where it didn't seem like that was the case.
Well, you mentioned the running back Jordan Mason, who went for like 147.
Yeah.
His backup. Well, we saw the same interview, and was it Scott Van Pelt interviewing him?
It was Lisa Salters.
Lisa Salters, thank you.
Yeah.
Because Van Pelt was on the field. But so she asked him the question, and how about how staccato he went?
Yeah.
I've known since Friday night that I was going to start, because he was like machinating or machinating, like, okay, who lied? What injury report was here? But he was forthright with that.
I love how he gets staccato, though, and then ultimately says the thing he probably wasn't supposed to say.
Right. And then blame the media for it afterwards when he got asked about it again in the locker room.
Really?
It's always our fault.
No, I missed that one.
He did.
Oh, wow.
Well, this is why I don't like talking to the media, because, whatever.
Jordan, you never talk to the media.
Yeah.
Nobody ever walks up to your stall because of Christian McCaffrey.
Correct. And you volunteer the information at the end of a game with the broadcast partner that's calling that game. That's different than, beat writer down the street. So you're fine.
Okay, well then 10, 15 minutes later, George Kittle joins the stage.
Yeah.
Did you happen to see that?
I did not.
Okay, well, he's rattling off, they were talking about not having McCaffrey.
Yeah.
But so multiple, that was Van Pelt. So multiple, so many options, Swiss Army knives all over the place and everything. Well, Kittle just spitballed, and, next week when we have Christian back. With Debo. So I'm like, what are we doing here? Boy, this is unbelievable.
49ers players breaking injury news all over ESPN last night. It works out, I guess.
But Kittle said, when we have Christian back next week. Next week is this Sunday.
It is. And the interesting thing, because if you remember that game last year, they had a lot of the same injury issues going into that one. McCaffrey was a question, I think. He ended up playing, but there was some doubt about whether he was going to go. I don't think they had Deebo Samuel, and Trent Williams was hurt as well. And that's the game where Brock Purdy ends up, I think, possibly playing the end of it with a concussion after getting hit the way he did.
Oh, that's right.
So
Jordan Hicks, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was a lot of injury subplots to that one as well.
But see,
sounds like there will be again.
Take the injuries, and sorry about that, take the injury subplot and add into it that there were cameras following Jefferson and Debo for the Netflix series receiver and Kittle. And, if somebody, like producer, director, gaff, grip guy or somebody caught wind like Wednesday or Thursday for a Monday, Debo ain't playing.
Yeah.
So something came out like on the first day of practice up to a Monday night game. That Debo ain't playing.
Yeah.
But then, when that person said it, those who were around and said, that had to be lock and key, top secret, throw the key. It's the injury situation because of fantasy football. It should be the injury reports and situation because of competitive balance with the team you're playing.
Yeah.
That's the A topic. No, it's the C topic behind betting, fantasy, and then, the reality of the game.
Yeah, well, and I think the reason injury reports exist at all, to go back in NFL history, if you think back to the 1960s, you had Paul Hornung and Alex Karras in 1963 both get suspended for the entire season for betting on, can't remember if they were betting on NFL games or if they were just betting on other sports. I think they were betting on NFL games, but a lot of the reason this existed is let's make it transparent so that people that get inside information, bookies that get inside information can't set odds on games based on information that's not available to the public.
Didn't know that.
So, that's the whole reason injury reports exist at all.
Well, I've been looking for Jamison Williams and Calvin Ridley's professional inspiration all of my life, and you just gave it to me.
Yeah, it's, I think that's why those things are there, so that everybody's ostensibly betting with the same information rather than having it being unfair. So, there's a lot of that stuff that, teams play fast and loose with it. We've seen it certainly over the years, a lot of teams where it's like, well, hey, that injury that a player talks about at the end of the season or, has on a documentary that pops up at the end of the season, that never popped up on an injury report.
Yeah.
So teams do this, but that one seemed particularly, black and white once you got to it in the end of it.
Okay, well, 2 years. You might have been covering not Steven Stamkos, Steven Strasburg and Drew Soren for the Washington Nationals in 2010. Were you?
I was, yes.
You were?
Yes.
Well,
that was Drew Soren's first year, in fact. Yes.
Storen, not Soren. All right, 3-2. But so you probably have heard of this or maybe remember it. But in that 2010 Favre season, his final season, the Monday night game at TCF Bank Stadium with the frozen field.
Right. It turned out to be his last game.
Right. Well, he was out.
Yep.
And day of game.
Yeah.
Dan Cole, the common man, got information from somebody who's like, tied to Favre.
Yeah.
Who Common knew and went on the radio and was like, no, he's playing tonight.
Oh, wow.
And
I remember that being kind of sneaky, but
because there were people taking shots at he's every circus needs a clown and just all that kind of stuff. Well, Common was right.
Yeah.
And so that went from an out to an in.
Yeah.
So, you talk about crazy with that happening. Holy cow.
Yeah, that one doesn't happen very often. I think you see a player.
That's the only time I can remember.
The only other one that comes to my mind, I can't remember if he was listed as out, but Kyle Rudolph, I think had a foot or an ankle against the Bengals in 2017. Or maybe convinced the Vikings to list him as doubtful and not out because I might be able to go. And that's obviously grew up in Cincinnati, wanted to play that game against that team.
Yeah, they clinched the division. Right.
Because that was the game they put Teddy back in when they're on the verge of a shutout and Teddy got his moment to come back in and the big ovation with Keenum leading the Teddy chance. And
then
Rudolph,
he threw a pick.
He did, and that ended the shutout because the Bengals scored after that. But I think that game, Rudolph was, I want to say doubtful and ended up playing. That's the only one I can remember that is kind of close to that.
We opened the show today talking about knowing what we saw on Sunday and really liking it.
Yeah.
From what we saw out of Sam, you mentioned Harrison Phillips, the defensive front, and we can pick really across the board more than a handful of guys that were fantastic against the Giants. But in part of that conversation, the idea is, well, it's the Giants. How do you see that? Because, I think you need to compartmentalize the idea that it's the Giants with also being able to check all the boxes of what you needed from this team in a game like this, lopsided victory and all. Is it just the Giants? How do you see it?
Well, there is a little bit of it's the Giants. I do think that's part of the overall calculation of this, but they have had games like this the last couple of years where they should be able to take care of it without a lot of problem. I think back to that Raiders game last year with Aiden O'Connell, and that's a little bit of a different thing, but they...
Dobbs.
They win the game 3-0, and it's close the whole way because the defense is playing well, but they couldn't do anything offensively.
Right.
So compared to that, where you should be able to put a team like this away, and they have not been good at putting people away really at all over the last few years. So the ability to say, we are going to make the plays we need to make, we're going to make the stops we have to make to not let the Giants come back. Because they had a couple of drives late in that game. You're thinking, okay, this thing's going to be 21-12 or something, 21-14 maybe if they go for two, whatever it would have worked out to be. But they make the stops they need, they get the turnovers they need. Obviously, Daniel Jones helped with that because he has not been very good. But the fact that they did what they had to do, and offensively, I think the fact that they were able to run the ball, that Sam Darnold played decisively, played efficiently for the most part, that stuff does count. And I think the fact that you win by 22 ultimately is a product of them doing a lot of things right and not beating themselves in ways that we have seen in the past. So, yes, it's the Giants, but I think the fact that they were able to win decisively does matter.
Ben Goessling is the weekly scribe and overseer for 9 to noon presentations, and we welcome you to Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center. The anything with the win against the Giants catch you off guard? Like, whoa.
In terms of like what they were able to pull off
for the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that, and I ended up writing about this yesterday, the fact that they really didn't blitz very much. In fact, it was the least they've blitzed ever under Brian Flores.
Was it one time?
It was like 22% overall.
Oh, wow.
So it ended up probably being 8 snaps or something like that.
Oh, my bad. I thought it was just one.
Yeah.
Like when Grenard was an inch from a forced fumble.
Yep. I mean, I think, Brian Flores talked about this last year. He considers blitzes to be a different thing than the colloquial definition of anytime it's 5 or more, it's a blitz.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for him, it's the traditional definition of it's an off-ball player coming after the quarterback is what he would consider a blitz. But, yeah, they didn't send 5 or more. If we use that as the working definition for now, they did not send 5 or more very often. And that obviously was something they were doing all the time last year. They had plenty of looks where it's 6, 7 on the line, and they dropped out of a lot of those things. I also thought they did a really good job not leaving escape lanes for Daniel Jones, because that has burned them in the past, certainly burned them in 2022. But a lot of the rush plan I thought was really sound. So, that part stuck out to me in the sense that they played it differently than I thought they would, certainly, but based on how much they've sent extra pressure in the past, and they did it very effectively.
So you're watching that game back and you're checking out number 97. What did you think, mentioning the depth and that Taimani is active, Rodriguez is not? Anything flash with the Tillerys of the world? I thought Bullard was really productive in some spots, actually impressive. Ran down, I think it was Jones, threw a guard or tackle out of his way like a rag doll. Loved what I saw from Bullard in spots. Did Tillery show up at all?
Yeah, there were a couple moments I think Tillery was in the backfield. I mean, overall, I think they got a lot more, and that Giants line was not very good, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, they needed John Michael Schmitz to really have a better showing than he did last year.
Yeah, he might not be very good. He just might be middling.
Yeah. Harrison Phillips had his way with him. The other guy that I noticed was not really in the mix, and I think there might have been one against Tillery, certainly one against Dallas Turner. Andrew Thomas was a top 10 pick, and there were a couple of times he got pushed back by, Dallas Turner is not bigger than him, obviously, and it's not just about size, it's leverage and explosiveness and all of those things, but he definitely was getting walked back quite a bit as well. So, yeah, I think a lot of the defensive pieces did some things. I mean, this is going to be more of the makeup of this group, where it is going to be, 15 snaps from Tillery or 20 from Bullard. I mean, they had a lot of those looks where it's 2 guys on the line, 4 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. A lot of that kind of stuff was still in the mix. But if you can get players that have roles and stay fresh because they're only playing 15 snaps a game, I do think that's a workable recipe too.
They ascribed the Vikings blitzed 11 times, and so you nailed it with roughly with the number. This is according to the intel I have. And the first blitz took place with early in the first quarter, and Jones hit Bellinger for 3 yards.
Yep.
Then after that, Jones incomplete. Now we go to quarter 2. Jones incomplete to that Penn State rookie tight end. Then after that, same possession, incomplete, short left to Johnson, the tight end. Then we get to the third quarter, Jones short middle to Malik Neighbors for 5. So this because Daboll, I mean, he knows offense.
Yeah.
And you can just tell by the flow here. Incomplete, short, incomplete. But then he started to hit on some.
Yeah.
Then they kind of felt what was coming. And so that's just generally how games go, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you figure out what teams are trying to do and you adjust to it, and you might show something early with the idea that you can come back to it later. I mean, the Vikings certainly did that offensively with the Justin Jefferson screen action that they set up for the touchdown with Jalen Naylor. But yeah, it's that constant figuring out what they are trying to do to you and how you can counter it, and you go from there. That's the constant back and forth.
They had max protection with 11:20 to go in the third quarter. They had max protection, 7 offensive linemen, and that was the neighbor's 25-yard hit.
Yeah.
So in watching the play, Flores sends 4.5. It ended up being 5. They got close to Jones.
They do like one of the tag rush things where
that's what it was.
Yeah. There was a lot of that too.
Yep. And
which they've done.
That was a heck of a pass by Jones right there to Neighbors, just over the outstretched fingertips, I think, of Josh Metellus. But anyway.
Jordan Addison is...
Stephon Gilmore.
Jordan Addison is an important part of this offense, not only from his production, but it's a weapon that draws attention away from Justin Jefferson. And this ankle thing, now it's both. Ankles appear to be ailing. Thoughts on the idea of potentially moving forward into a game like this? Like, what is the value that Addison provides to open things up for Justin Jefferson, and how that potentially changes the burden on a Jalen Nailor for at least a week, maybe, if Jordan's not able to go?
Yeah, I think it does change it, because if you think back to that 49ers game last year, Jefferson was out. Addison had a big night. That was the one where he took the ball away from, I think, Chardavius Ward on the touchdown, where it looked like it was going to be a pick, and he just ripped it out of his hands after, I think, Ward had done that to him earlier in the game. That was, I think, right before halftime, kind of was the play that gave them the spark to go and win that game.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think it matters. I think it's one of those things that takes them back a step. I mean, Nailor has been impressive when we've seen him in training camp. We've seen him a little bit in the preseason. I think he's going to have to play a big role, but is he ready to do that for 50, 60 snaps? That's a little bit of a question. I mean, and when you have Addison out and you have TJ Hawkinson out, and Jefferson's going to get all the attention that he's going to get, you are going to need Nailor, Trent Sherfield, Brandon Powell, all to be active and involved, and they'll have to figure out how to do that. We'll see what Addison's status looks like throughout the week. I would bet they're going to be fairly cautious with him, though. So I think looking at it the way it sits now, it would be a little bit of a surprise to me if he's progressed enough by the point that he can go Sunday. We'll have to see how the week goes, but knowing this is 2 ankles now and how they kind of like to say, let's be a little cautious with that stuff, I'd be a little surprised if he's out there.
The Scribe at Ben Goessling via Twitter, where you can learn about Access Vikings, the podcast. Don't forget about the newsletter and more for Ben with the Star Tribune, StarTribune.com. After this, it's 9 to noon.
Hey, Rubes, this football season, Bell Bank is giving one KFAN listener each week $1,000 to pay it forward to a charity of their choice. How cool is that? Just head over to KFAN.com, keyword contest to learn more and enter today. That's KFAN.com, keyword contest.
Ben, I can't remember if it like a coordinator said it or it was a story or whatever, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but Harrison Smith and during with one of the deeper safety rooms in the NFL, it's been written about, it's been said by O'Connell, has said it multiple times. The belief was that Harrison might have his reps cut during the year. So, maybe not now.
Yeah.
But was that said? And B, he played every single snap.
Yeah.
Sunday, all 68.
Yeah, I think they've talked about trying to do some of that to try to reduce the load, just to keep him a little fresher. And maybe we'll see if it happens over the season. But certainly did not happen on Sunday. And my guess would be that he is not going to be the guy that says, I don't mind coming out. He's a hard guy to keep off the field.
Right.
And, when he can show that he knows how to be, even if he's not running quite the way he was, he knows how to be in the right place. And I remember Anthony Harris talking about that when he was here, that once you learn to watch film and know where you're supposed to be, you don't have to run as much, because if your eyes take you to the right spot, there's less wasted effort. And if you can still get to the right spot when you're supposed to be there, you can still play a lot of the position. So Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to watch because they certainly have the depth at the position to play him less if they wanted to do that. But the base of it on Sunday, again, was that 3 safety nickel package.
A lot.
Yeah. I mean, all 3 of those guys, again, were towards the top of the snap count, and they had a lot of things. They had some 4-2 in front of the nickel. They had some 2-4.
Wow.
They mixed and matched the front a lot, but the 5 defensive backs with 3 safeties in the mix was largely the way they played on the back end of it.
You assumedly at some point over the last year have watched Van Ginkel's pick 6 from the right arm of Sam Howell, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then that makes you a scribe, an overseer, and an elite football mind. Because when you watch the Van Ginkel interception from Daniel Jones,
yeah,
and then you watch the one from Howell, he does the same thing. He looks over to the left, like right at the perfect time.
Yep.
Now, the one against Washington, there were 4 receivers to his left. 3 were in a triangle, and then you had somebody wide left. That was the Giants formation.
Yeah.
The Washington formation was a 2x2 or a 2x3. So it was different, but it was the same. And, he's played one game. All right. But you don't come across players frequently who even low key get people, who have been around it a while like you and I to say that is Antoine Winfield-esque. That's Winfield-esque what he's doing out there, right?
To look over and say, okay, there's a bunch of receivers here. This is probably, we can see that in the press box sometimes, but I'm not going to lie and say that I always see it because I don't watch football at the level that players do, but to see it at field level and when you're about to rush the quarterback and saying, this looks like a tell for a screen over here.
Yeah.
I'm going to be ready for this, and then I'm going to come up and make it was a heck of a catch, too. Just stuck
that's a
one
hard
arm
catch.
up in there. Kind of a soft rush, probably because he was trying to split the difference between rushing and then having some contain on that screen. But the reaction and then making that play, that was a rare thing. I mean, when you have a defensive end, that's what he's playing in that particular down, playing off the edge and reading routes like a corner that I can jump and get a pick 6. It's like, there's a reason he's been in the end zone, I think, 4 times in his career. There's a level of intuition that he brings to a play like that you're right, you don't see it all that often.
Right.
This is kind of a global view, but week 1, the illegal formation penalties that we saw throughout the league, and even in our game, I think there were 16 total flags in the game, 13 of them maybe in the first half alone. Is this the precedent-setting time of the year? I mean, from Thursday night in the opener down to Brazil and back through even last night. Clearly, there's something that the league is trying to nip. What did you take from that? I hate even the talker of just ripping refs and just imagining, hey, here's 100 extra pages to the rule book every year, but also be perfect.
Yeah,
it's going the wrong way. But precedent-setting time of the year, you think?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I'm going to bring it up with O'Connell. I don't know how many penalties there were last night in Niners and Jets. However, in 14 of the games, the 14 games.
There were only 7 last night, by the way. That might be the lowest. Of the league.
Well, the average was 14-9. So it's a 14. These are accepted penalties, which means they're more.
Right.
More flags in the air, laundry on the field. The average was 14 accepted penalties.
Wow.
But then there's New England and Cincinnati with Land Clark. There only were 7. So there were 7 in that game, 9 in Indy and Houston, 9 in Vegas and the LA Chargers. And what'd you say? How many last night?
7 last night.
Yeah, 7 last night. But we got 13, 17, 14, 14, 15, 17, 16, 16. Wow. I mean, it averaged out to be 14. That's a lot.
That is a lot. And I do think there are things typically when they've got kind of their areas of emphasis and they talk about some of these things, they'll typically release the video. The refs will talk about it a little bit before the season. They are told, hey, if this is an emphasis, we need to call this enough. And it tends to work itself out over the course of the season, either because teams get the message or the league starts to say, okay, we've made our point and this has gotten better, so we're not going to watch it quite as tight. But it does tend to go that way. I think the the illegal formation stuff is a response to, I think there's been a lot of complaints about the Chiefs doing this over the years with Jawan Taylor setting back, a half step to get into his pass set. Probably
not only that,
earlier.
Andy starts early.
Yeah, there's that too.
He's just half a click back. Andy's early,
right,
all the time.
Right. Yes, the false.
He's the
starts,
new Bakhtiari.
Yes, the false starts are pretty common with him. Something you see come up a lot. So, yeah, I think you'll see some of this stuff early while you are getting people used to it. I mean, the one I noticed this watching it back too. One of the illegal formations in the Vikings-Giants game was on the kickoff. The Giants had a guy, I think it was Andre Phillips, that went when the ball was kicked. Just probably brain fart of, okay, this is how kickoffs have worked my entire life, rather than waiting until the guy caught it. He went, and then he realized, oh, wait, I'm not supposed to do that, and tried to run back, and they threw the flag. But, yeah, there's going to be some of those things where people are getting used to that rule, and probably the areas of emphasis on things like illegal formations. But, yeah, I think that stuff will get better. It's not great to watch, but some of that, I think, is the league trying to make the point of, we are serious about these things that we told you about all offseason.
The way that the game goes breeds confidence with the Niners,
for sure.
right?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think this is a tough matchup. I don't know that this is one that I'll go in and pick them to win just because the depth of what the 49ers have and the number of playmakers they have. But the Giants game was important, knowing what is coming after that when it's 49ers, Texans here next week are pretty good. And then the Packers will see what things look like with Jordan Love's health. But then you go, it's Aaron Rodgers in London. So being able to take care of the one that you thought, okay, this is probably the easiest of that group. And
doing it the way they did.
Yeah, and they'll say we don't look ahead, any of that stuff. But to make an opening statement of, no, we actually do believe we can win with this team, with this quarterback, and I think that's especially important. The way Sam Darnold starts that game, it does breed confidence. It does make a statement of, well, yeah, maybe we weren't just blowing smoke all offseason. And the season will ultimately determine this. They're going to be tougher tests than the Giants, but to win that one decisively and not just squeak through it, I do think helps the guys in that locker room start to believe it a little more. And that stuff I do think can snowball over the course of a year.
Are you mad at me?
No.
I'm doing a friendship check, and I'm on the G's.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Yeah.
I can now move on to the next letter.
Yeah, you're actually going backwards in the alphabet because wasn't Brian Harper in here before? And
that wasn't on
H?
the radio.
Yeah, I know.
Yep. So
now you're probably mad at me.
It
Theater
has
of
to
the
be
mind,
public.
Ben.
Oh, sure.
Just make sure all the G's are cool.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Ben Goessling at Ben Goessling via Twitter. Access Vikings, the podcast, is really good. Don't forget about the newsletter, and you can read more about that pinned atop his Twitter feed at Ben Goessling. Covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune and StarTribune.com. Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, 17 minutes from now. Don't miss that. We'll be right back.
Your Minnesota Twins continue the push towards the postseason this Friday when they take on the Cincinnati Reds, and we want to get you to the ballpark. Caller 11 right now will win a pair of tickets to this Friday's game. Call 800-320-5326.
Man, the Vikings Entertainment Network doesn't mess around with this Kevin O'Connell piece, does it? I mean, we're moving chairs. We got new lights on. We got Shill Weedy over here going, all right, 3-2. Will Sheedy, don't leave home without him. Curly Harris wondering why we're not doing the Vikings Derby anymore. I mean, this is serious stuff, isn't it?
No, it's nutty. And we got full official helmet. Now we got purple lighting taking place. I mean, this is unbelievable. A Niners helmet in the back there.
Right.
Somebody here at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center, they are in charge of the helmets.
Yeah.
And they have to keep track of all 32 of those. But number 2 for the Vikings this year being that classic Niners look behind you there.
Yeah, this is a high-end production, VEN. Yeah, you know we. News Genord provided by Canterbury Park and CanterburyPark.com.
You want to talk about a lack of a high-end operation right now with the baseball team? Or
Well, I'd like to share that Canterbury, we only have 7 days of live racing remaining. So we go Thursday, Saturday, and then Thursday, Saturday, then Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. CanterburyPark.com for information, but come on out to the racetrack on Thursday if you're so inclined. In fact, some friends of mine and yours truly, we own a horse named Mia Baby who's going to run in the second race on Thursday. And it's a horse we have for our chapel program there. 10% of what she earns goes to the ministry program. She's run second and third, and it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time. Mia Baby race 2 Thursday, 5 o'clock is when we start. Come say hello.
To the Minnesota Twins, they lose 6-2 yesterday to the visiting Los Angeles Angels, 6-2 after a 2-run single in the opening frame off of Festa. Then it's Drury with a 2-run shot. It was 4-0. Twins never really felt like they were in this one yesterday. Detmers on the mound went 6 strong. He was pretty good for the Halos yesterday.
Reed Detmers reminding everybody of former Angels Nolan Ryan and Frank Tanana.
You're in a more elite baseball. All I was thinking of was Ty Detmer, singular. No relation, but I was thinking of Ty Detmer.
Right.
And I'm thinking about Pablo Lopez needing to throw a gem and get this thing. This team's lost 4 straight, PA, 6 of their last 7. And an issue here is they have the Reds at home later this week. But after that, it's 7 in a row on the road at Cleveland for 4 and then 3 against Boston. Now, Boston's kind of fallen out of the wild card mix, but things are getting a heck of a lot more spine-tinglingly close than they were just a couple of weeks ago. As we're talking about Bobby Witt and the Royals losing 6 or 7 straight, and they can't do anything to save their lives. Now the Twins are doing that themselves, and it's an awful time for it to happen.
Well, I think the Kitties, the Detroit Tigers have won 2 in a row. So those right behind you as down the stretch they come. Detroit, Boston, there's another clipping penalty in there too.
The Mariners.
Seattle Mariners.
And all of them have, let's just say, one more recently than the Twins.
Right. And so you can't say they're not going to be caught. And here's why. They're not hitting. The timeliness or lack thereof of the hitting, from what I understand, led the manager Rocco Baldelli after the series against the Royals to say that was completely unprofessional and cut his press conference short and stuff like that. So this is a mettle test. Mettle is being tested here by the players, and here's why. Because he's not the first manager in the history of Major League Baseball or pro sports to say something like that. But when you do lay down a verbal gauntlet of calling a team or people unprofessional, it goes one of 2 ways. Their mettle is tested and the tenacity rises to the top, or they're all done. That's it. They're just bleep him. I mean, it's whatever, man. I'm just curious to see how this is going to go, because first game after the unprofessional vibe, they're playing one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball at home. They need it like they need to breathe, and they didn't just lose, they got killed. So just follow that.
Last bit for you. I don't know if this will come up with Kevin O'Connell next segment at all.
What are you doing here, Will?
I had this in every game except for last Monday night, for the Monday night game, so it's not completely accurate, but 34% of kickoffs were returned in week 1, up from 20% in week 1 a year ago. You had the kick return touchdown by DJ Dallas, only 4 kick return touchdowns all of last year. You had 3 returns of at least 40 yards in week 1. That's up from just under 1.5 per week in 2023. Kind of mixed results in terms of how this kickoff was going to be utilized. But in the end, there was more action with the new kickoff than there was last season.
And that's one of several topics coming up for Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, who joins us from TCO Studios, part of the VEN, Vikings Entertainment Network, each and every Tuesday at 11. That includes today, and it's next.